Welcome back to the English Never Give Up podcast. Here's something that might surprise you. While thousands of people stress about Canadian immigration interviews, the reality is that many Canadian visa applications are processed without an interview at all. But here's the catch. If you are called for one, that 15 to 30-minute conversation could determine your entire future in Canada. Today, we're diving deep into immigration interview practice for Canada in 2026. Specifically, what's changed with the new IRCC rules, how to nail the most common questions, and the preparation strategies that actually work. By the end of this episode, you'll understand exactly what immigration officers are looking for and how to present yourself with confidence. Let me bring in someone who's been tracking these changes closely. So help me understand, when IRCC does call someone for an interview, what are they really trying to figure out?
Great question. According to the page content from Visa Falcon, when you're called for an interview, the officer wants to verify your purpose of visit and your intent to return home. But here's what's crucial. Consistency with your application forms is absolutely critical.
Consistency. That makes sense. But what does that look like in practice?
Well, think about it this way. If you wrote on your application that you're visiting for tourism, but then in the interview you mention maybe looking for work opportunities, that's a red flag. The page content from Uttervision explains that officers now compare interview answers with digital records, and they have access to previous applications and border entry records.
Wait, so they're basically fact-checking you in real time?
Exactly. And it's gotten more sophisticated. The content indicates that before you even walk into the interview room, your profile may already be categorized as low risk or high risk based on your travel history, past refusals, and work background.
That's actually kind of intense. So what are the questions they're most likely to ask?
According to the Visa Falcon Guide, there are 6 core questions that come up repeatedly. The first one is, why do you want to visit Canada? And here's where specificity matters. They want to hear concrete plans, not vague statements.
Give me an example of what that sounds like.
Sure. Instead of saying, I want to see Canada, a better answer would be, I am visiting for tourism. I plan to visit Banff National Park and spend a few days in Vancouver. The page content emphasizes that IRCC values a clear travel itinerary.
Interesting. What about the money question? I imagine they want to know you can support yourself.
Absolutely. The question is usually, how will you support yourself? And the sample answer they provide is specific. I have $5,000 TAD in my savings account dedicated to this trip. The guide suggests approximately $1,000 TAD per week of stay as a safe benchmark.
$1,000 per week? That's actually quite a bit.
It is, and that's the reality of Canadian immigration requirements. They want to ensure you won't become a burden on their system. But here's something interesting. The page content from Canan.co mentions that only about 10% of applicants are actually called for interviews.
Only 10%? So most people are stressing about something that probably won't even happen to them?
Exactly. But if you are in that 10%, preparation becomes everything. And here's where 2026 has brought some significant changes, especially for family class applications.
What kind of changes?
According to the Immigration to Canada content, on January 16, 2026, IRCC updated its interview rules. The big change is that officers now have greater discretion when applicants can't attend interviews at overseas visa offices. They can assess whether concerns can be resolved remotely from within Canada.
So remote interviews are now officially a thing?
For certain situations, yes. The updated procedures apply to both overseas family class applications and spouse or common law partner in Canada applications. It's designed to reduce unnecessary barriers during processing.
That actually seems like a really practical update. But let's get back to preparation. What should people actually be doing to get ready?
The project practical content outlines 8 key preparation areas. Documentation is first. You need to gather all required documents, organize them, and make copies. But it's not just about having the papers, it's about knowing them inside and out.
What else is on that list?
Language proficiency is huge. The content emphasizes taking language proficiency tests if required and practicing speaking. Then there's cultural knowledge. Understanding Canadian culture and societal expectations. Financial stability, medical examinations, technical skills, and legal understanding round out the list.
Cultural knowledge is interesting. What does that actually mean in practice?
It means familiarizing yourself with Canadian norms and expectations through reading and research. Remember, the Life Ashore content mentions that the interview evaluates your readiness to integrate into Canadian society, not just your eligibility.
So they're trying to figure out if you'll actually fit in, not just whether you meet the technical requirements.
Exactly. And this is where the interview has evolved beyond just basic questions. The Utter Vision content explains that officers are now paying much closer attention to long-term immigration intent. They're concerned about people using temporary visas as a pathway to remain permanently.
That makes sense from their perspective. They want to make sure people are being honest about their intentions.
Right. And here's something that might surprise people. Behavior during the interview has become more influential. The content indicates that immigration officers are trained to observe how applicants speak, not only what they say.
So it's not just about having the right answers, it's about how you deliver them?
Absolutely. The VisaMind content emphasizes avoiding signs of nervousness or hostility, as these can be misinterpreted. They want to see confidence, but not arrogance.
What about the specific questions around family ties? I imagine that's a big area they focus on.
Huge area. The Visa Falcon Guide specifically mentions that if you have family in Canada, you should disclose it because IRCC checks family ties closely. The sample answer they provide is, yes, I have a cousin in Toronto. I plan to visit him for a weekend.
So honesty really is the best policy here.
Completely. The content repeatedly emphasizes being honest about previous visa refusals, family connections, and your actual plans. Lying will almost certainly backfire because they have access to so much information now.
Let's talk about the employment question. That seems like another area where consistency would be crucial.
Absolutely. The sample answer for what is your current occupation is, I work as a civil engineer at company. I've been there for 6 years. The key is demonstrating steady employment because it helps prove you will return home.
6 years at the same company definitely shows stability. What about people who are freelancers or have more varied work histories?
That's where the Utter Vision content becomes really relevant. It mentions that if an applicant describes themselves as a full-time employee, but their background suggests freelance or unstable work, that contradiction can raise doubts. You need to be prepared to explain any gaps or inconsistencies.
So if you're a freelancer, own that and be ready to explain how it works?
Exactly. The VisaMind content emphasizes that addressing gaps in your personal history is key to maintaining transparency. If there are periods of unemployment or unexplained travel, be prepared to discuss these and provide context.
What about the practical stuff, like what to bring, how to dress, that kind of thing?
The Visa Falcon Guide has a clear do and don't list. Do, be honest about previous visa refusals, have a clear travel itinerary, show strong ties to your home country, bring proof of sufficient funds, and dress formally and speak clearly.
And the don'ts?
Don't give vague answers about dates, don't lie about family in Canada, don't say you might look for work, don't present expired documents, and don't argue with the officer. That last one is probably more important than people realize.
Yeah, arguing with an immigration officer seems like a guaranteed way to get rejected.
Absolutely. And here's something interesting from the current data. According to the IRCC guide content, the express entry pool size is approximately 215,000 active profiles as of January 2026, with an average CRS score of 467 points.
That's a lot of competition. Does that affect the interview process?
It does in the sense that IRCC is being more selective overall. The content shows that successful candidates typically have CLB 8+ in English or French, and processing times are currently 5-6 months for 80% of applications.
So the bar is pretty high across the board.
It is. But here's the thing, if you make it to the interview stage, you're already in a select group. The key is not to overthink it, but to be thoroughly prepared and authentic.
What about people who are already in Canada? Does the process work differently for them?
That's where the January 2026 updates really matter. The Immigration to Canada content explains that the new rules specifically address situations where overseas family class applicants are now living in Canada and can't easily attend interviews at visa offices abroad.
So they've recognized that people's situations change during the application process.
Exactly. The updated policy allows officers to assess each case individually, ensuring interviews are conducted in a format that balances program integrity with practical realities. It's actually a pretty sensible approach.
Let's talk about what happens after the interview. What should people expect?
The VisaMind content emphasizes monitoring your application status with IRCC for updates. The interview isn't the end of the process, it's just one part of their overall assessment.
And I imagine the waiting is probably the hardest part.
It really is. But the key thing to remember is that if you've prepared properly and been honest throughout the process, you've done everything you can control.
So when you step back from all of this, what's the most important thing for people to understand about Canadian immigration interviews in 2026?
The biggest shift is that these interviews have evolved from routine checks to sophisticated risk assessment conversations. Consistency matters more than perfect answers, and preparation is absolutely everything.
And the good news is that most people won't even face an interview. But for those who do, the tools and strategies we've discussed can make all the difference.
Exactly. Whether it's understanding the new remote interview options, preparing specific answers to common questions, or just knowing what officers are really looking for, preparation gives you confidence. And confidence shows.
Here's what I want you to do if you're facing a Canadian immigration interview. Start with those 8 preparation areas we discussed. Get your documents organised, practice your answers to the core questions, and remember that specificity beats vague responses every time. Most importantly, be honest. The system is designed to catch inconsistencies, but it's also designed to welcome people who are genuine about their intentions. Your 15 to 30-minute conversation could change your life. Make sure you're ready for it.